The thunder of rushing water woke Noah Quinn from a dreamless sleep, its distant roar growing louder with each passing second. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. He threw off his blankets and grabbed his boots, knowing the sound all too well. A flash flood was tearing through Rattlesnake Canyon, and it was heading straight for his camp. Wyoming Territory, 1878. The night sky above Fort Laramie was pitch black, clouds obscuring the stars and moon that might have otherwise guided him. Noah had been trailing a small herd of mustangs for days, planning to break the strongest ones and sell them in town. His temporary camp sat a quarter-mile from the canyon's edge, too close if the water rose high enough. "Damn this rain," he muttered, hastily gathering his essentials. 3 days of downpours in the hills had saturated the ground. Now came the consequence. He'd just finished saddling his paint stallion, Rusty, when the roar became deafening. The ground beneath his feet vibrated and Rusty danced nervously, rolling his eyes. Noah swung into the saddle, urged the horse to higher ground, and turned to watch nature's fury unfold. A wall of water, mud, and debris burst from the canyon's mouth like a demon unleashed from hell. Even from his elevated position, Noah felt a chill run down his spine. The flood consumed everything in its path: trees, rocks, and God knows what else. He whispered a prayer, grateful for his years of experience that had taught him to camp on the rise rather than in the lowlands. As the initial surge subsided, the rain began again, a steady, soaking downpour. Noah pulled his hat lower and prepared to wait out the night on higher ground. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong amidst nature's chaos, a child's cry. Noah strained his ears, certain he was mistaken, but there it was again, faint but unmistakable. "Hello," he called out, turning Rusty toward the sound. "Anybody there?" The crying continued, desperate and frightened. Noah guided Rusty carefully down the slope, staying well above the new waterline. His eyes, accustomed to tracking in poor light, scanned the debris field that had been deposited by the initial surge. About 50 yards away, he spotted movement on a small island of relatively dry land, a dark shape huddled against a fallen cottonwood. "Hold on," he shouted over the rain and rushing water. "I'm coming." Navigating carefully, Noah urged Rusty across the treacherous ground. As they drew closer, he made out 2 figures, one small and one larger. A woman clutched a child to her chest, both of them soaked to the bone and covered in mud. The woman's head snapped up at his approach, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. She pulled the child closer, protective even in her clearly weakened state. "Madam," Noah called softly, dismounting a few feet away to avoid frightening them further. "I'm here to help. Are you hurt?" The woman stared at him, trembling violently. Her long hair, dark with water, clung to her pale face. The child in her arms, a girl no more than 4 or 5, continued to sob quietly. "Our wagon," the woman finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "The horses spooked. We were crossing. The water came so fast." Noah nodded, understanding immediately. They must have been attempting to ford the normally shallow creek that ran through the canyon bottom when the flood hit. "I'm Noah Quinn," he said, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "I've got a dry camp not far from here. Can you stand?" The woman tried to rise but collapsed back against the log. Noah noticed then that her dress was torn and bloodied at the hem, revealing an angry gash on her ankle. "You're hurt," he stated. "Let me help you both." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded, exhaustion winning over caution. "I'm Emma," she said, her voice shaking. "Emma Zimmerman. This is my daughter, Sarah." Noah knelt beside them, speaking gently. "Hello, Sarah. You've been very brave. Would you like to ride a horse?" The little girl peered at him through swollen, red-rimmed eyes, then looked to her mother for reassurance. Emma stroked her daughter's wet hair. "It's all right, sweetheart." Noah helped them both onto Rusty, then led the horse carefully back to higher ground. The rain continued to fall, but less violently now, and the worst of the flood had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape of mud and ruin. His camp, thankfully, remained intact, a small lean-to he'd constructed against a rock face, with a canvas tarp extending outward to create a sheltered area. The fire was long extinguished, but he quickly set about building a new one under the driest portion of the shelter. "Let's get you both warm," he said, helping Emma and Sarah down from the horse. Emma winced when her injured ankle touched the ground, and Noah caught her before she could fall. "Sorry," she murmured, clearly uncomfortable with the contact. "No need for apologies," he replied, helping her to sit on his bedroll near where the fire would soon be. "Rest that ankle. I'll tend to it once I've got some light." Sarah clung to her mother, eyes darting around the unfamiliar surroundings. Her small body continued to shiver despite Emma's attempts to warm her. Noah worked efficiently, coaxing a fire from his dry kindling stored in an oilskin pouch. Once flames licked upward, he retrieved his spare shirt and pants from his saddlebags. "Madam, you and your daughter need to get out of those wet clothes. I'll turn my back, but you should change into these. They'll be too big, but they're dry." Emma hesitated only briefly before accepting the clothes. "Thank you." Sarah's soaked through. Noah busied himself with unsaddling Rusty and setting up a makeshift clothesline under the tarp, giving the pair privacy. After several minutes, Emma called softly that they were decent. When Noah turned back, he found Emma wearing his flannel shirt, which hung nearly to her knees, and Sarah wrapped in his spare blanket. Their wet garments lay in a heap beside them. "I'll hang these to dry," he said, gathering their sodden clothes. As he worked, he noticed Emma watching him warily, her arm protectively around Sarah, who had finally stopped crying and now stared tiredly at the dancing flames. "You folks traveling alone?" Noah asked, keeping his tone conversational as he returned to the fire. Emma nodded. "We were headed to Fort Laramie. My brother's there." She paused, then added softly, "Everything we owned was in that wagon." Noah saw the despair in her eyes and recognized it. He'd seen it in his own reflection years ago, after returning from the war to find his family farm foreclosed and his parents buried side by side in the local cemetery. "First light, I'll go back and see what might be salvageable," he offered. "You don't have to do that," Emma said quickly. "I know I don't," Noah replied, adding wood to the fire. "But I will." He reached for his coffee pot. "How about something warm to drink? It's not much, but it'll help." As he prepared the coffee, he noticed Sarah's eyelids drooping. The poor child was fighting sleep, clearly exhausted by the ordeal. "Is your ankle causing you much pain?" he asked Emma, nodding toward her injured leg. "It's bearable," she answered, though the tightness around her eyes suggested otherwise. "I should take a look at it." "I'm no doctor, but I've patched up my fair share of injuries." After a moment's consideration, Emma nodded and carefully extended her leg. Noah gently examined the wound, a nasty gash about 4 inches long, but not dangerously deep. "Needs cleaning and bandaging," he said. "It'll be painful, but I don't think you'll need stitches." While Sarah finally surrendered to sleep against her mother's side, Noah cleaned and bandaged Emma's ankle using supplies from his saddlebags. She remained stoic throughout, though he felt her tense when he applied the whiskey he used for disinfecting wounds. "You have a gentle touch for a cowboy," she observed quietly when he'd finished. Noah smiled slightly. "Had plenty of practice." Horses don't complain as much as men, but they remember who hurts them and who doesn't. As he handed her a cup of coffee, their fingers brushed briefly. In the firelight, he could see her features more clearly: a heart-shaped face with high cheekbones, a delicate nose, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Despite the mud and exhaustion, she was strikingly beautiful. "How old is your daughter?" he asked, settling back on his heels. 5, Emma replied, looking down at the sleeping child. "She'll be 6 come autumn." Noah nodded. "She's a brave little thing. Not many grown men would handle being swept away in a flood so well." A ghost of a smile touched Emma's lips. "She's tougher than she looks." "Like her mother, I'd wager." Emma's eyes met his, and something unspoken passed between them, a mutual recognition, perhaps, of the resilience required to survive in this unforgiving territory. "Thank you," she said after a moment. "We would have died out there if you hadn't found us." Noah shook his head. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Emma said softly. "Not anyone." They fell into silence then, the crackling fire and the diminishing rainfall the only sounds in the night. Noah watched as Emma's exhaustion finally overcame her wariness. Her head nodded forward once, twice, and then she slumped back against the rock wall, asleep. Carefully, Noah adjusted the blanket around both mother and daughter, then added more wood to the fire. As he settled on the opposite side of the flames to keep watch through the remainder of the night, he wondered about the story behind these 2 survivors and why they were traveling alone through such dangerous country. Morning arrived with a mist rising from the sodden ground, the sun breaking through clouds in golden shafts that illuminated a landscape transformed by water's fury. Noah had dozed intermittently through the night, always keeping one eye on his unexpected guests and the other on their surroundings. Emma woke first, momentarily confused by her surroundings until her gaze landed on Noah, already brewing fresh coffee. "Good morning," he said quietly, mindful of the still sleeping Sarah. "How's the ankle?" Emma gingerly moved her foot and winced. "Swollen, but I'll manage." "You should stay off it today," Noah advised, pouring coffee into a tin cup for her. "I meant what I said about looking for your belongings. If you tell me what to look for, I'll do my best to find what I can." Emma accepted the coffee gratefully. "Most of it will be ruined, I expect." "But there was a wooden chest my husband made it. It's solid oak with iron bands, if it didn't break apart." She trailed off, and Noah noticed the way her voice caught on the word husband. There was a story there, one she wasn't ready to share. "Oak and iron has a fighting chance," he said. "I'll look for it. Anything else?" "Sarah's doll," Emma said softly. "It was her grandmother's. She'll be heartbroken if it's gone for good." Noah nodded. "I'll keep an eye out." Sarah stirred then, blinking in confusion before scrambling to press herself against her mother. "It's all right, sweetheart," Emma soothed. "This is Mr. Quinn, remember? He helped us last night." The little girl studied Noah with solemn brown eyes, clutching the blanket around her small shoulders. "Hello again, Sarah," Noah said gently. "Would you like something to eat?" "I've got some dried apple and jerky. Not much of a breakfast, but it'll fill your belly." After receiving an encouraging nod from her mother, Sarah accepted the offered food, though she remained watchful. While they ate, Noah outlined his plan. "I'll ride down to where I found you and see what's left of your wagon. You 2 should rest here. I've left water and more food within reach. I shouldn't be gone more than a few hours." Emma seemed about to protest, but then glanced at her injured ankle and nodded reluctantly. "We'll be fine. But please be careful, the ground will be unstable after the flood." "I've weathered a few flash floods in my time," Noah assured her. "This isn't my first roundup after the water recedes." He prepared to leave, checking his gear and saddling Rusty, who seemed eager for movement after the tense night. As he mounted, Noah noticed Sarah watching him intently. "I'll look for your doll," he promised her directly. "What does she look like?" "She has yellow hair and a blue dress," Sarah replied, her voice small but clear. "Her name is Molly." Noah tipped his hat. "Then I'll keep a special eye out for Miss Molly." As he rode away, he felt Emma's gaze following him, a mixture of gratitude and apprehension in her eyes. Whatever circumstances had led her to be traveling alone with her young daughter, it was clear she wasn't accustomed to depending on the kindness of strangers. The devastation wrought by the flash flood became more apparent as Noah approached the canyon. The normally docile creek had become a raging torrent that carved a new, wider path through the landscape. Debris hung in tree branches 10 feet above the current water level, showing how high the surge had reached. Following the flood's path, Noah eventually came upon the remains of a wagon, half buried in mud and wedged against a boulder. One wheel protruded at an awkward angle, and splintered wood was scattered across a 20-yard radius. The horses were nowhere to be seen, either swept away by the flood, or if they were lucky, they had broken free and escaped to higher ground. Noah dismounted and approached the wreckage cautiously, testing each step on the muddy ground. The wagon bed was cracked but partially intact, though everything inside had been tossed about by the water's fury. Soaked books, clothing, and household goods were strewn through the mud. A woman's boot, a child's wooden toy soldier, fragments of a life interrupted. For over an hour, Noah sifted through the debris, gathering anything that seemed salvageable into a pile on higher ground. He found a leather pouch containing papers and a small amount of money, surprisingly intact within its waterproof confines. A few pieces of clothing, a metal cooking pot. He was about to admit defeat on finding the oak chest when his boot struck something solid beneath the mud. Kneeling, Noah dug with his hands until he revealed the corner of a box. With considerable effort, he excavated the chest, a sturdy piece of craftsmanship that had indeed survived the flood, though it was caked with mud and one corner was dented. The chest was locked, and Noah made no attempt to open it. Whatever it contained was Emma's business. He secured it to Rusty's saddle, along with the other recovered items. There was still no sign of Sarah's doll, and Noah felt a pang of disappointment at the thought of returning without it. He expanded his search area, following the flood's path farther downstream. A flash of color caught his eye, something blue among the brown debris caught in a tangle of branches. Noah waded carefully through the shallows and reached up to extract a mud-covered rag doll with the remains of a blue dress and matted yellow yarn for hair. "Miss Molly, I presume," he murmured, gently cleaning some of the mud from the doll's fabric face. It was bedraggled but intact. Sarah would be able to recognize her beloved toy, and that was what mattered. With his findings secured, Noah turned Rusty back toward camp. The sun was high now, the day warming rapidly as the moisture from the previous night's rain began to evaporate. By the time he returned, Emma and Sarah might be ready to discuss their next steps, though he already knew he couldn't simply send them on their way with nothing but a damaged chest and a muddy doll. When the camp came into view, Noah was surprised to see that Emma had managed to create order in his normally Spartan surroundings. Their clothes, now dry, were folded neatly. The fire had been maintained, and something that smelled far better than his usual trail coffee was brewing. Sarah spotted him first, pointing excitedly. "Mama, he's back." Emma turned, shading her eyes against the sun. She had fashioned a walking stick from a branch and stood somewhat unsteadily, clearly having tested her injured ankle despite his advice to rest it. Noah dismounted, leading Rusty the final few yards. "Found a few things," he said, gesturing to his haul, "including something special." He reached into his saddlebag and carefully withdrew the doll. Sarah's eyes widened and she rushed forward with an excited cry. "Molly, you found her." The genuine joy on the child's face as she clutched the muddy doll to her chest made every minute of Noah's search worthwhile. He glanced at Emma and found her watching her daughter with a tender smile, though tears glistened in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, meeting his gaze. "That doll. It's one of the few connections she has to her grandmother, to our life before." Noah nodded, understanding there was a story in those words. "Found your chest, too," he said, moving to untie it from Rusty's saddle. "It's taken some damage, but it held together." Relief washed over Emma's features. "The chest was my husband's work. He was a carpenter. Inside are our most precious belongings, photographs, letters, the deed to land my brother purchased for us in Fort Laramie." As Noah set the chest down near their camp, he noted how Emma ran her fingers over the wood, touching the craftsman's work with reverence. "Was there any sign of the horses?" she asked. Noah shook his head. "No, but that could be good news. Smart horses head for high ground when water rises. They might have broken free and saved themselves." "They weren't ours," Emma admitted. "We hired a man in Cheyenne to take us to Fort Laramie, but She glanced at Sarah, who was now carefully washing mud from her doll's face with a damp cloth. "He abandoned us when riders approached our camp 2 days ago, took most of our money and rode off, leaving us with the wagon." Noah's jaw tightened. "Some men aren't worthy of the air they breathe." "I handled the reins as best I could," Emma continued. "We were making slow progress. When the rain started, I thought we should find shelter, but I didn't recognize the signs of the flash flood until it was almost upon us." "If I'd been more knowledgeable, you couldn't have known," Noah interrupted. "Even experienced travelers get caught in flash floods." "You saved your daughter and yourself. That's what matters." Emma looked down at her bandaged ankle. "And then you saved us both." "Speaking of that ankle, you should be resting it," Noah admonished gently. "I'm not one for sitting idle," Emma replied with a hint of defiance. "Besides, Sarah needed tending, and I thought I should contribute something in return for your help. I found some wild onions and added them to your coffee beans for a more flavorful brew." Noah raised an eyebrow. "Coffee with onions?" "It's better than it sounds," Emma assured him, her lips quirking. "My brother taught me. He spent years living with the Shoshone. They know how to make the most of what nature provides." Intrigued, Noah poured himself a cup of the concoction and took an experimental sip. The flavor was indeed richer, with a complexity his regular trail coffee lacked. "Well, I'll be," he said, genuinely impressed. "That's a trick worth knowing." Emma smiled, and Noah found himself noticing the way it transformed her face, bringing warmth to her storm-gray eyes. "I recovered a few other items," he said, suddenly aware he'd been staring. "Some clothing, cooking utensils, and a pouch with papers that seemed important." Emma's expression brightened. "The deed, I had it in a leather pouch." Noah retrieved it from his saddlebags, and Emma sighed with relief when she verified its contents. "The land deed is here, along with my marriage certificate and Sarah's birth record, and a little money, not much, but enough to help us start over." "About that," Noah said, settling beside the fire. "Fort Laramie is still a good 2 days' ride from here, and that's on horseback, with your ankle injured and no wagon." Emma's face fell as she acknowledged the reality of their situation. "I hadn't thought that far ahead yet. I was just so relieved you found our belongings." Noah considered their options. "I was planning to head into Fort Laramie myself in a few days. I've been gathering mustangs to sell at the fort. There's a cavalry unit there always in need of good mounts." "You're a horse trader?" Emma asked. "Among other things," Noah replied. "I've been a lot of things since the war. Cattle driver, bronc buster, guide. Whatever work keeps me moving." Emma studied him, and Noah wondered what she saw: a weathered cowboy of 32, his dark hair too long beneath his hat, his face tanned and lined from years under the western sun. "My brother mentioned a horse trader who passed through last year," she said thoughtfully. "A man with a reputation for fair deals and exceptional skill with even the wildest mustangs. Would that be you?" Noah shrugged. "There are several traders who work this territory, but I've sold stock at Fort Laramie before." "What's your brother's name?" "Ethan Zimmerman. He was a lieutenant in the Union Army but left military service after the war. Now he manages the general store at the fort." Noah's eyebrows rose in recognition. Tall fellow, beard missing 2 fingers on his left hand. Emma nodded eagerly. "You know him?" "We've done business," Noah confirmed. "He's a fair man. Pays what he says he'll pay, doesn't haggle just for sport." Sarah, who had been quiet during their exchange, suddenly appeared at her mother's side. "Molly's clean now," she announced, holding up the doll. Though still stained, the toy looked considerably better than when Noah had first pulled it from the mud. "She looks wonderful, sweetheart," Emma said. "Did you thank Mr. Quinn for finding her?" Sarah turned to Noah, her brown eyes solemn. "Thank you for saving Molly, Mr. Quinn." "You're welcome, Miss Sarah," Noah replied, matching her serious tone. "Molly's a lucky doll to have someone who loves her so much." The little girl nodded in agreement, then hesitated before asking, "Do you have a little girl too, Sarah?" Emma began, clearly embarrassed by her daughter's directness. "It's all right," Noah assured her. "No, Sarah, I don't have any children. I've never been married." "Why not?" The child persisted. Noah scratched his chin thoughtfully. How to explain to a 5-year-old that some men weren't meant for settling down? That after the war, he'd found peace only in the solitude of wild places, tracking mustangs across empty landscapes where the ghosts of fallen comrades couldn't follow. "I suppose I never found the right person to marry," he said finally. "And I move around a lot. That's not easy on a family." Sarah considered this, her small brow furrowed. "Mama and I move around too. Papa's in heaven, and now we're going to live with Uncle Ethan." "I'm sorry about your father," Noah said gently, glancing at Emma, whose expression had become carefully neutral. "He's been gone 3 years now," Emma said quietly. "Influenza took him and Sarah's grandmother within a week of each other." Noah nodded, understanding the devastation such a loss would bring. "That's a heavy burden to bear." "We managed," Emma said, her tone indicating the subject was closed. "Now we should discuss how to proceed. I can pay you to take us to Fort Laramie, Mr. Quinn." "It won't be much, but no payment necessary," Noah interrupted. "I'm headed that direction anyway, but we should wait another day for your ankle to improve. The terrain between here and the fort isn't forgiving." Emma looked as though she might protest, but then sighed and nodded. "One more day, then. But I insist on contributing. I'm a fair cook, and I can mend that tear in your jacket I noticed earlier." Noah smiled. "I won't turn down a home-cooked meal or mending. My sewing skills are limited to stitching up leather and the occasional wound." For the remainder of the day, they settled into an unexpected but comfortable routine. Emma, despite Noah's continued suggestions that she rest, insisted on cooking a proper meal using the supplies he had on hand, supplemented with edible plants she identified near their camp. Sarah, having overcome her initial shyness, followed Noah as he tended to Rusty and checked on the small herd of mustangs corralled in a natural enclosure of rocks a short distance away. "They're beautiful," Sarah breathed, watching the wild horses with wide eyes. "Are they yours?" "Not exactly," Noah explained. "They're wild horses I've gathered. I'll gentle them a bit before selling them at Fort Laramie." "Gentle them," Sarah repeated, puzzled. "Help them get used to people," Noah clarified. "Wild horses aren't born knowing how to work with humans." "They have to learn to trust us," Sarah nodded sagely. "Like me and Molly had to learn to trust you. Noah glanced at the perceptive child in surprise. That's right. Trust has to be earned. Mama says you earned ours by saving us from the big water, Sarah informed him. Your mama is a wise woman, Noah replied, touched by the simple statement. When they returned to camp, Emma had produced a surprisingly flavorful stew from Noah's basic provisions. As they ate, Sarah regaled her mother with descriptions of the Mustangs, particularly a dappled gray filly that had apparently captured her heart. She sounds lovely, Emma said, smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. But remember, the horses belong to Mr. Quinn. Actually, Noah interjected, that filly isn't spoken for yet. The cavalry prefers geldings for military mounts. I usually sell the mares to settlers or ranchers. Sarah's eyes lit up. Could we buy her? For Uncle Ethan's store? Emma shook her head regretfully. I'm afraid we don't have enough money for a horse, sweetheart. But perhaps when we're settled, we can think about it. Noah watched the interaction, noting the careful way Emma managed her daughter's expectations without crushing her spirit. It was the mark of a good mother, one who had clearly been navigating difficult circumstances for some time. As twilight descended, Noah built up the fire while Emma helped Sarah prepare for sleep. The little girl insisted on a story, and Emma obliged with a tale about a clever rabbit that outsmarted a hungry wolf. Noah listened from across the fire, admiring Emma's storytelling abilities, the way she changed her voice for different characters and used her hands to illustrate the action. When Sarah finally drifted off to sleep, Emma carefully tucked the blanket around her and Molly before rejoining Noah by the fire. She's a remarkable child, Noah observed. Emma smiled fondly. She's my strength. After James died, my husband, there were days I couldn't find the will to get out of bed. But Sarah needed me, so I found a way to keep going. What made you decide to come to Fort Laramie? Noah asked, passing her a cup of coffee. Emma wrapped her hands around the warm cup. We were living in Illinois, in the small town where I grew up. After James and my mother-in-law died, the carpentry shop failed. I tried to keep it going, but... She shrugged. People didn't want to hire a woman, even if I knew the business side well. When the bank foreclosed, Ethan invited us to join him. He's been in Wyoming Territory for 5 years and writes often about the opportunities here. Noah nodded, understanding. The territory is changing fast, railroads bringing more settlers each month. A woman with your resourcefulness could do well here. That's my hope, Emma admitted. Ethan says Fort Laramie is growing beyond just a military outpost. There are families now, children who need education. I was a teacher before I married. A teacher, Noah repeated, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Her precise speech, the way she had organized their meager camp, her storytelling skills all indicated education beyond what most frontier women received. It seems a lifetime ago, Emma said softly. Sometimes I wonder if that young woman still exists somewhere inside me. She does, Noah said with certainty. I see her in how you handle Sarah, in how quickly you adapted to this situation. Education doesn't abandon you just because circumstances change. Emma looked at him with surprise, as though not expecting such insight from a rough-hewn cowboy. That's kind of you to say. It's not kindness if it's true, Noah replied simply. They fell silent, the crackling fire and Sarah's soft breathing the only sounds in the night. Noah found himself studying Emma's profile, illuminated by the firelight, the proud set of her chin, the delicate curve of her neck, the way a strand of her chestnut hair had escaped its pins to curl against her cheek. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was a resilience to her that called to something in him, a recognition, perhaps, of a kindred spirit who had faced loss and continued forward. You should get some rest, he said eventually, breaking the comfortable silence. "Tomorrow you can test that ankle, see if it's strong enough for travel the day after." Emma nodded, rising carefully. "Good night, Mr. Quinn, and thank you again for everything." "Noah," he corrected gently. "If we're traveling together, you might as well use my given name." She smiled, and something warm unfurled in his chest. "Good night, Noah. I'm Emma, not Madam or Mrs. Zimmerman." "Emma," he repeated, liking the way her name felt. "Sleep well." As she moved to join her daughter on the bedroll he'd insisted they use, Noah remained by the fire, contemplating the unexpected turn his solitary existence had taken. 2 days ago, he had been focused solely on gathering mustangs and making his way to Fort Laramie for the cavalry sale. Now, he found himself responsible for a woman and child who had lost nearly everything except each other. More unsettling was the realization that he didn't mind this disruption to his carefully maintained independence. In fact, watching Emma's gentle interaction with Sarah, hearing their soft laughter, sharing meals prepared by hands more skilled than his own, it awakened a longing he'd buried years ago. A yearning for connection, for family, for roots. Noah shook his head at his own foolishness. Emma Zimmerman was a widow with a young daughter, traveling to join her brother and start a new life. His role was simply to ensure they reached Fort Laramie safely. Nothing more. Yet as he settled down to sleep, his dreams were filled with storm-gray eyes and the sound of a woman's soft voice telling stories by firelight. The next day dawned clear and bright, the landscape already beginning to dry under the Wyoming sun. Emma's ankle, while still tender, had improved enough for her to walk short distances without the makeshift crutch. "We should be able to travel tomorrow," she announced after testing her mobility. "I won't slow you down too much." Noah, who had been adjusting Rusty's saddle, glanced over at her. "No rush. The Mustang sale isn't for another week." "Even so," Emma insisted, "we've imposed on your hospitality long enough. Sarah and I are eager to reach Fort Laramie and see my brother." Noah recognized the pride in her tone, a determination not to be a burden. He respected it, even as he found himself reluctant to see their time together end. "We'll leave at first light then," he agreed. "But today we should prepare. I need to work with the Mustangs a bit more, make sure they're ready for the journey." Sarah, who had been listening nearby, looked up excitedly. "Can I watch you with the horses?" "Sarah," Emma began, "Mr. Quinn Noah has work to do. We shouldn't disturb him." "She's no disturbance," Noah assured them. "In fact, having a quiet observer sometimes helps the horses realize humans aren't threatening, as long as she follows my instructions about staying safe." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I promise to be good." Emma hesitated, then relented. "All right, but be careful, and come back if Noah asks you to." As Noah and Sarah walked toward the makeshift corral, the little girl peppered him with questions about horses, how they communicated, why some had spots, whether they slept standing up. Noah found himself enjoying her curious mind and earnest interest. At the corral, he demonstrated how he approached the still wary mustangs, moving slowly and speaking in low, soothing tones. Sarah watched attentively from her perch on the rocks outside the enclosure, gasping with delight when the dappled gray filly cautiously accepted an apple slice from Noah's outstretched hand. "She likes you," Sarah exclaimed. "She's deciding I might not be dangerous," Noah corrected with a smile. "Trust comes slowly with wild things." "What's her name?" Sarah asked. Noah considered the filly with her storm cloud coat and intelligent eyes. "She doesn't have one yet. Perhaps you'd like to suggest something." Sarah's face lit up at the honor. She studied the young horse intently before declaring, "Storm, because she's gray like the sky before rain." "Storm," Noah repeated, nodding approval. "It suits her." For the next few hours, Noah worked with each of the Mustangs, particularly those that would need to be calm enough to follow behind Rusty on the journey to Fort Laramie. Sarah remained a rapt audience, occasionally offering commentary or asking questions that revealed her growing understanding of horse behavior. When they returned to camp for the midday meal, Emma had been busy. She'd mended Noah's torn jacket with such tiny, even stitches that the repair was nearly invisible. She'd also reorganized his pack, cleaned his cooking implements, and prepared a meal that somehow elevated his basic provisions into something that actually made his mouth water. "You've been industrious," Noah observed, accepting a plate of food. "As I said, I'm not one for sitting idle," Emma replied with a slight smile. "Besides, it's the least I can do to repay your kindness." As they ate, Noah outlined his plan for the journey. "We'll lead 3 of the gentler Mustangs behind us. You and Sarah can ride Rusty. He's steady and won't mind the weight. I'll walk alongside." Emma frowned. "I can't take your horse while you walk." "I'm used to covering ground on foot," Noah assured her. "And your ankle still needs rest if it's going to heal properly." Before Emma could protest further, Sarah interjected excitedly. "Mama, Noah let me name the gray horse. She's called Storm now." Emma smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "That's a fine name. Did Storm take to Noah's training?" "She's the smartest one," Sarah declared confidently. "Noah says she has good, what was it? Conformation," Noah supplied. "It means she's well built with strong legs and good proportions." "Yes, that," Sarah nodded, "and she has kind eyes." "Kind eyes are important in a horse," Emma agreed, her own eyes meeting Noah's briefly. Something unspoken passed between them, a shared appreciation of Sarah's innocent wisdom. After the meal, while Sarah napped in the shade, Emma helped Noah prepare for their departure. As they worked side by side sorting supplies, Noah found himself stealing glances at her. The sunlight caught the auburn highlights in her chestnut hair, and her movements were graceful despite her injured ankle. "Your daughter has a natural way with horses," he commented. "Not many children her age would have the patience to observe without interfering." Emma smiled proudly. "Sarah has always been observant. James used to say she had an old soul in a young body." "You must miss him very much," Noah said gently. Emma's hand stilled on the rope she was coiling. "Yes," she said after a moment. "Though the sharpest pain has dulled with time, now I remember the good years more than the loss." She glanced up at him. "You said you fought in the war," Noah nodded. "Union cavalry, enlisted in '62, fought until Appomattox." "James was a carpenter for the army," Emma said. "He built wagons, repaired barracks. He saw the aftermath of battles but was spared the fighting." She studied Noah's face. "You've seen things that changed you." It wasn't a question, and Noah didn't treat it as one. Few people recognized the shadows that war left behind, but Emma saw it in him immediately. "Is that why you prefer the company of horses to people?" she asked softly. Noah considered deflecting the question with humor, but found himself answering honestly. "Partly. After the war, crowds made me jumpy. Too much noise, too many sudden movements. Out here I can breathe, see trouble coming from a distance." Emma nodded understanding. "Ethan was the same when he first returned. He went to live with the Shoshone for almost a year before he could tolerate being around white settlements again." "Your brother found a good way to heal," Noah acknowledged. "The native peoples understand that some wounds aren't visible." "And you?" Emma asked. "Have you found healing in your solitude?" Noah looked out at the vast landscape stretching beyond their camp. "Most days, though I'm finding that perhaps complete solitude isn't always the answer." He met her eyes directly. "Sometimes unexpected company reminds you of what you've been missing." A flush of color touched Emma's cheeks, and she looked away, busying herself with the supplies. We should finish preparing. Tomorrow will come early. Noah respected her retreat, understanding that he'd ventured into territory that made her uncomfortable. She was, after all, a widow still honoring her husband's memory, and he was merely a trail-worn cowboy who had happened upon her in a moment of crisis. Yet he couldn't deny the connection he felt growing between them, a quiet understanding that went beyond words. He'd known many women in his travels, shared brief companionships that satisfied immediate needs but left no lasting impression. Emma Zimmerman was different. In just 2 days, she and Sarah had awakened something in him he'd thought long dormant, a desire for more than transient encounters, for something enduring. As the day progressed into evening, they completed their preparations for the journey. Noah selected which Mustangs would accompany them and which would remain corralled until he could return for them. Emma packed their meager belongings and prepared the last meal they would share at this camp. Sarah, refreshed from her nap, entertained them with imaginative stories about the adventures Storm would have when they reached Fort Laramie. Her innocent assumption that the filly would somehow be part of their future hung in the air, neither adult willing to dispel her happiness with practical concerns. When darkness fell, and Sarah had again drifted to sleep, Noah and Emma sat by the fire, sharing a final cup of coffee. "How did you come to be a horse trader?" Emma asked, breaking a comfortable silence. Noah leaned back against his saddle. "I always had a way with horses, even before the war. In the cavalry, I became known for being able to gentle even the most stubborn mounts. After Appomattox, I drifted west, working ranch jobs here and there. But I found I preferred my own company to taking orders from ranch foremen who hadn't seen what I'd seen." He paused, taking a sip of coffee before continuing. "About 5 years ago, I came across a herd of Mustangs near the Bighorn Mountains. Beautiful animals, completely wild. I managed to catch a few, worked with them, and sold them in the nearest town. Realized I could make a decent living doing what I loved without answering to anyone." Emma nodded. "Independence is valuable. That's part of what brings me to Wyoming Territory, the chance to build something that belongs to Sarah and me alone." "What will you do in Fort Laramie?" Noah asked. "You mentioned teaching." "Ethan says the settlement needs a proper school," Emma replied, her eyes lighting with purpose. "Until now, children have been taught by the chaplain's wife when her duties allow, or by parents who have the time and knowledge. But with more families arriving, there's need for dedicated instruction." "You sound excited about the prospect," Noah observed. "I am," Emma admitted. "Teaching was my first love before James. The idea of returning to it feels like reclaiming a part of myself." "You'll be good at it," Noah said with certainty. "I've seen how you explain things to Sarah, clear, patient, encouraging. Those are the marks of a born teacher." Emma looked pleased by his assessment. "Thank you. That means a great deal." As the fire burned lower, neither seemed eager to suggest retiring for the night. There was an unacknowledged awareness that these quiet moments of connection would soon give way to the practical demands of travel, and then to the inevitable parting when they reached Fort Laramie. "What will you do after you sell the Mustangs?" Emma finally asked, her voice soft in the darkness. Noah shrugged. "What I always do. Move on, find another herd, repeat the process. Always moving," Emma murmured. "Never staying." "It's what I know," Noah replied simply. Emma studied him in the firelight, her expression thoughtful. "Have you ever considered that perhaps there might be more waiting for you than just the next herd of wild horses?" The question hung between them, laden with meaning beyond its simple words. Noah felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that this woman saw through the carefully constructed barriers he'd maintained for years. "Until recently," he said carefully, I wasn't sure there was anything else I wanted." Their eyes met across the dying embers, and in that moment, Noah knew his solitary existence had been irrevocably altered by the flash flood that had brought Emma and Sarah Zimmerman into his life. "We should rest," Emma said finally, breaking the charged silence. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Noah nodded, though part of him wanted to prolong this moment to explore the unspoken possibility that hovered between them. But Emma was right. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, and they both needed clear heads to face them. "Good night, Emma," he said softly. "Good night, Noah," she replied, her voice equally gentle. As she moved away to join her sleeping daughter, Noah remained by the fire, contemplating the journey ahead, not just the physical distance to Fort Laramie, but the emotional territory he found himself unexpectedly traversing. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a different future than the one he'd accepted as his fate. A future that included laughter around a dinner table, stories by a hearth fire, a child's excited questions, and a woman's knowing smile. It was a dangerous vision, filled with uncertainties and potential heartache. But as Noah finally stretched out to sleep under the star-filled Wyoming sky, he found himself willing to consider the risk. Dawn painted the eastern horizon in shades of gold and crimson as Noah, Emma, and Sarah prepared to depart. The Mustangs had been gathered, Rusty saddled, and their meager belongings secured. Sarah clutched Molly tightly as Noah lifted her onto Rusty's back, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "You'll ride behind your mother and hold on tight," Noah instructed, helping Emma mount despite her insistence that she could manage alone. "Rusty's steady, but the terrain is rough in places." Emma settled in the saddle, adjusting her skirts before reaching back to secure Sarah against her. The oak chest and their salvaged possessions were balanced in saddlebags or wrapped in oilcloth and tied behind the saddle. "You're certain you won't take turns riding?" Emma asked, concern evident in her expression as she watched Noah check the lead ropes on the 3 Mustangs that would accompany them. "I'm certain," Noah replied with a reassuring smile. "The first leg of our journey follows a creek with good grazing. We'll make camp early, and tomorrow we'll alternate if needed." With final adjustments made, they set off as the sun crested the horizon. Noah led Rusty by the reins, the 3 Mustangs following behind on their own lead lines. The dappled gray filly, now officially named Storm, seemed the most accepting of the arrangement, walking calmly behind the procession. The morning passed pleasantly, with Sarah pointing out interesting rock formations, birds, and the occasional jackrabbit that bounded away at their approach. Emma engaged her daughter in educational discussions about the plants they passed and the geological features of the landscape, turning their journey into an impromptu natural history lesson. Noah, listening to their exchanges, found himself impressed by Emma's knowledge and her ability to present information in ways that captured Sarah's imagination. She would indeed make an excellent teacher for the children of Fort Laramie. By midday, when they stopped to rest and water the horses at a small tributary, Emma's ankle had begun to pain her again. Though she tried to hide her discomfort, Noah noticed her wince as she dismounted. "We'll stop earlier than planned," he decided, helping her to a flat rock in the shade of a cottonwood. "There's a good camping spot about an hour ahead where the creek widens into a pool, plenty of grass for the horses and shelter from the wind." Emma began to protest, but subsided when Noah gave her a stern look. "Your ankle won't heal if you push too hard," he reminded her. "Besides, a leisurely pace gives the Mustangs more time to adjust to being led. That will make the rest of our journey smoother." His practical reasoning seemed to satisfy her pride, and Emma nodded agreement. Sarah, meanwhile, had discovered a patch of wildflowers growing near the water and was carefully selecting blossoms to weave into a crown for Molly. As Noah tended to the horses, he found his gaze continually drawn to the tableau mother and daughter presented Emma sitting with quiet dignity despite her discomfort, offering suggestions for Sarah's flower arrangement, both of them framed by the rugged beauty of the Wyoming landscape. They belonged here, he realized with sudden clarity. Not just in this territory, but in this moment, in this place, as if the wild country had been waiting for them to arrive and complete some unfinished picture. And perhaps, a quiet voice suggested in his mind, they belonged with him as well. The thought should have alarmed him, yet it settled into his consciousness with surprising naturalness. 3 days ago, he had been a solitary man content with his nomadic existence. Now, he found himself contemplating possibilities that had never before seemed within reach. When they resumed their journey, Noah found himself sharing stories he rarely told about growing up on a small farm in Ohio, about his first encounters with the vast landscapes of the West, about the characters he'd met in his travels. Sarah listened eagerly, while Emma's thoughtful questions drew out details he'd almost forgotten himself. True to his word, they reached the promised camping spot with several hours of daylight remaining. It was indeed an ideal location, a natural clearing beside a pool where the creek widened, surrounded by cottonwoods that provided shade and shelter. The grass grew thick along the water's edge, offering perfect grazing for the horses. Noah helped Emma and Sarah dismount, then set about establishing their camp with an efficiency born of years of practice. Emma insisted on contributing despite her ankle, directing Sarah in gathering kindling while she unpacked their meager cooking supplies. As the afternoon mellowed toward evening, Noah secured the Mustangs in a rope corral strung between trees, leaving Rusty free to graze nearby. When he returned to the camp, he found Emma teaching Sarah to make johnnycakes from the cornmeal in his provisions. "Those smell better than any johnnycakes I've managed," Noah commented, washing his hands in the creek before joining them. "The secret is patience," Emma replied, flipping one of the golden cakes. "Most men cook them too quickly over too hot a fire." Noah chuckled, guilty as charged. When you're hungry after a long day's ride, patience isn't always in abundant supply. "Mama makes the best johnnycakes," Sarah declared loyally, "and Uncle Ethan says her apple pie is like heaven on a plate." "Is that so?" Noah glanced at Emma, who looked faintly embarrassed by the praise. "I haven't had pie in longer than I care to remember." "When we reach Fort Laramie," Sarah said with childlike certainty, "Mama will make you pie, won't you, Mama?" Emma met Noah's eyes briefly before turning her attention back to the cooking. "If Mr. Quinn would like pie, I'd be happy to bake one as proper thanks for his help." "Noah," he corrected gently, "and I'd consider it an honor." The simple domestic moment struck him with unexpected force, the three of them sharing a meal, making plans, exchanging smiles. It felt like family, like belonging, like home. After they had eaten, Noah suggested they check on Storm, knowing how attached Sarah had become to the filly. The little girl eagerly agreed, taking Noah's hand as they walked to the rope corral. Emma followed more slowly, using a walking stick Noah had cut for her from a straight branch. As they approached, Storm raised her head from grazing, ears pricked forward with interest. Under Noah's guidance, Sarah offered the filly an apple slice on her flat palm, just as she'd been shown. Storm's velvety muzzle tickled the child's hand as she delicately accepted the treat. Sarah's delighted giggle warmed something in Noah's chest. He glanced at Emma and found her watching them with a softness in her expression that made his breath catch. "She has a way with animals," Noah said quietly as Sarah continued to commune with the filly. Natural instinct for reading their moods. Like her father, Emma replied. James could gentle the most nervous horse, win the trust of the most suspicious dog. Sarah seems to have inherited that gift. Noah nodded, appreciating Emma's willingness to acknowledge her late husband's virtues. Some widows became bitter about their loss, but Emma spoke of James with a respectful fondness that honored his memory without closing her heart to the present. She'll be heartbroken to part with Storm when we reach Fort Laramie, Emma continued, a shadow crossing her face. Noah watched Sarah whispering secrets to the filly, who stood attentively as if understanding every word. Perhaps that parting isn't inevitable, he said, the words forming as the thought crystallized. Emma looked at him questioningly. Storm isn't suited for cavalry work, Noah explained. Too small, too fine-boned, she'd be better as a lady's mount or for a child when properly trained. I've been considering what to do with her. Noah, Emma began, clearly understanding his implication. We can't possibly consider her a gift, he interrupted. For Sarah's bravery during the flood, for your johnnycakes, for making this journey a pleasure rather than a solitary duty. Emma's eyes widened. That's too generous. Storm is worth exactly what I say she's worth, Noah stated firmly. And I say she's worth seeing that smile on your daughter's face. He nodded toward Sarah, who was now stroking the filly's neck with gentle reverence. I don't know what to say, Emma whispered, clearly overwhelmed by the gesture. Say you'll accept, Noah replied simply. I can deliver her to Fort Laramie after she's had more training. By then, you and Sarah should be settled, perhaps with a small stable behind whatever house you find. The future he was painting seemed to materialize between them, a vision of permanence, of connection beyond their current journey. Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she looked from Sarah and Storm back to Noah. Why would you do this for us? She asked, her voice barely audible. Noah considered his answer carefully. Because in 3 days, you and Sarah have reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that solitude isn't the same as freedom, that sharing the trail can be as rewarding as blazing it alone. He paused, aware he was approaching dangerous ground but unable to stop the truth that rose to his lips. And because when I imagine returning to my solitary existence after delivering you safely to Fort Laramie, I find the prospect less appealing than it once was. Emma's breath caught, and for a moment, neither spoke. The only sounds were Sarah's continued murmurings to Storm and the gentle evening breeze rustling through the cottonwoods. Noah, Emma finally said, his name soft on her lips. I don't know what the future holds for us in Fort Laramie. Everything is uncertain except that we must build a new life there. I understand, he said, respecting her caution. I'm not asking for promises, just acknowledging that these days with you and Sarah have affected me in ways I didn't expect. Emma nodded, a small smile touching her lips. They've affected us as well. Sarah talks about you constantly, and I. She hesitated, then continued with quiet honesty. I found myself wondering what it would be like if our paths had crossed under different circumstances. Before Noah could respond, Sarah called excitedly, Mama, Noah. Storm let me hug her neck. The moment between them eased as they turned their attention to the child's accomplishment. But something had shifted, an acknowledgement of possibilities that would linger in the air between them. As twilight deepened into night, they returned to camp. Noah built up the fire while Emma helped Sarah prepare for sleep, their routine already comfortable after just a few days together. When Sarah had drifted off, cuddling Molly close, Emma joined Noah by the fire. They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching the flames dance in the gathering darkness. The night was clear, stars emerging in brilliant profusion across the velvet sky. "It's beautiful here," Emma said softly, gazing upward. "I never saw stars like this in Illinois." "Too many trees, too close to town." "That's one of the gifts of this country," Noah replied. "It shows you the heavens unobstructed, makes a man realize how small he is in the grand scheme of things." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Yet also how significant. Each star has its place, its purpose." "Like people. A teacher's perspective," Noah observed with a smile. "Perhaps," Emma agreed. "I've always believed that understanding our place in the world, however humble, gives meaning to our struggles." Noah studied her profile, illuminated by firelight. "You've had your share of struggles." "As have you," Emma replied, meeting his gaze. "We all carry burdens from the past. The question is whether we let them define our future." Her words resonated deeply with Noah. For years, he had allowed the war and its aftermath to shape his existence, choosing isolation over connection, movement over stability, the predictable company of horses over the complex relationships of human society. "What if," he began carefully, "a person has carried those burdens so long they've become part of who they are? Can they still choose a different path?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I believe we're always free to choose, even when choices seem limited by circumstance." "After James died, I could have remained in our empty house, surrounded by memories and dwindling resources. Instead, I chose to follow Ethan's invitation and seek a new beginning." She paused, then added gently, "The past shapes us, Noah, but it needn't imprison us." Her insight, offered without judgment, opened something in Noah's chest, a feeling of possibility he hadn't experienced in years. Here was a woman who understood loss and renewal, who faced uncertainties with courage and grace, who saw him not as the hardened loner he presented to the world, but as the man he might yet become. "Emma," he said, his voice low with emotion, "when we reach Fort Laramie." She waited, her eyes steady on his. "When we reach Fort Laramie," Noah continued, "I'd like to call on you and Sarah, properly, if that would be welcome." A smile bloomed on Emma's face, transforming her features with a radiance that outshone the firelight. "That would be very welcome, Noah Quinn." The simple acceptance filled Noah with unexpected joy. He reached across the space between them, his hand finding hers. Their fingers interlaced naturally, as if they had been made to fit together. They remained thus, hands joined in silent communion, until the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. No further words were needed. The understanding between them transcended speech, a promise of possibilities to be explored when their journey reached its destination. Morning brought a change in the weather, with clouds gathering on the western horizon promising rain by afternoon. Noah studied the sky with a practiced eye as he saddled Rusty. "We should reach the shelter of Black Pine Ridge by midday," he told Emma as she helped Sarah pack their few belongings. "There's a prospector's cabin there, abandoned but sound. We can wait out the weather if needed." Emma nodded, glancing at the darkening sky. "Will the creek be safe to cross if it rains?" "We'll cross before the rain starts," Noah assured her. "I know this country well enough to read its moods." They set out earlier than the previous day, the 3 Mustangs following obediently behind Rusty. Sarah, still excited about Storm, chattered happily about what she would teach the filly once they reached Fort Laramie. Emma, Noah noticed, seemed more at ease despite the threatening weather. Her smile came more readily, her posture less guarded when their eyes met. The landscape changed as they traveled, the open grassland giving way to more rugged terrain as they approached the foothills that would lead them to Fort Laramie. Noah maintained a steady pace, mindful of Emma's injury and the need to reach shelter before the rain. They had just forded the shallow creek when the wind picked up, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of approaching rain. "We're making good time," Noah called over his shoulder. "The ridge is just beyond those cottonwoods." As they passed through the small grove, Noah suddenly raised his hand in a signal to halt. His posture tensed, and he scanned the trees ahead with narrowed eyes. "What is it?" Emma asked quietly, instinctively pulling Sarah closer. Noah didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. Then, with deliberate casualness, he moved closer to Rusty's side. "We have company," he said in a low voice. "Riders up ahead watching the trail. Could be nothing, but I don't like how they're positioned." Emma's face paled slightly. "Bandits, possibly," Noah acknowledged, "or just cautious travelers like ourselves. Either way, we'll proceed carefully." He untied his rifle from its scabbard on Rusty's saddle, keeping it across his arm in a non-threatening but ready position. "If I tell you to ride," he instructed Emma softly, "you take Sarah and go. Rusty knows the way to Fort Laramie. Don't stop until you reach the fort." "I won't leave you," Emma protested. "You will if Sarah's safety is at stake," Noah replied firmly. "Promise me, Emma." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded, her arms tightening protectively around her daughter. They continued forward at a walk, Noah vigilant as they emerged from the cottonwood grove into a small clearing. 3 men on horseback waited there, positioned to block the trail ahead. Their appearance was rough, unshaven, dusty from the trail, with the hard eyes of men accustomed to taking what they wanted. "Morning," the center rider called, his friendly tone belied by the hand resting near his holstered pistol. "Fine day for traveling." "It is," Noah agreed pleasantly, stopping at a prudent distance. "Though rain's coming soon. We're making for shelter at Black Pine Ridge." The man nodded, his gaze moving past Noah to Emma and Sarah on Rusty's back, then to the 3 Mustangs trailing behind. "That's some fine horseflesh you're leading. Planning to sell them at Fort Laramie." "That's right," Noah confirmed, maintaining his casual demeanor while calculating distances and angles. The 3 men were spread out, making it difficult to keep them all in his field of vision. "Cavalry's in the market for good mounts." "Cavalry pays well," the man remarked, nudging his horse a few steps closer. "So do we. Might be interested in taking those ponies off your hands, save you the trouble of the journey." Noah smiled thinly. "Appreciate the offer, but I've got a contract waiting. The lady and her daughter are expected by family at the fort as well." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Contract, eh? Must be worth a fair sum to escort a woman and child through this country." His gaze lingered on Emma in a way that made Noah's jaw tighten. Pretty woman like that, traveling with just one man for protection. Dangerous times. The implied threat hung in the air. Noah remained outwardly calm, though his mind raced through options. 3 against 1 weren't favorable odds, especially with Emma and Sarah to protect. "Times are always dangerous for those who make them so," Noah replied evenly. "We're peaceful travelers with nothing of value beyond these horses, which, as I said, are promised to the cavalry at Fort Laramie." He shifted slightly, allowing the men to see the rifle in his hands more clearly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd like to reach shelter before the rain." A tense silence followed as the leader assessed Noah, his steady stance, the confident handling of his weapon, the calm resolution in his eyes. Whatever the man saw caused him to reconsider, his expression shifting from predatory to calculating. "No need for unfriendliness," he said finally, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Just making conversation with fellow travelers." He nudged his horse sideways, appearing to clear the path. "Fort Laramie's still a good day's ride. You'll want to hurry if you're aiming to beat that storm." Noah didn't move, his instincts warning him that the apparent retreat was too convenient. "You first," he suggested pleasantly. "Since you're headed away from the fort, I assume." The leader's smile tightened, confirming Noah's suspicion that they'd planned to let him pass, then attack from behind. "Actually," the man said, "we thought we'd rest here a while, enjoy the fine morning." "Suit yourselves," Noah replied. He glanced back at Emma, whose face remained composed despite the fear evident in her eyes. "Mrs. Zimmerman, I believe we'll take the western trail instead. Bit longer, but the view is worth it." Understanding his intention, Emma nodded and gathered Rusty's reins, ready to follow Noah's lead. The leader's facade of friendliness slipped. "Now hold on. No call to be taking the long way around. We're just being sociable." "I appreciate sociability as much as the next man," Noah said, his tone hardening. "But my responsibility is to see these good people safely to Fort Laramie. So we'll be on our way by whichever route we choose." He backed Rusty and Emma slowly, maintaining his vigilance. The Mustangs, sensing the tension, shifted nervously but followed Rusty's lead. The standoff stretched for several taut seconds before the leader abruptly laughed, though no humor reached his eyes. "Have it your way, friend. But remember, roads in this territory have a way of bringing folks together again. Might be we'll meet in Fort Laramie after all." "Might be," Noah agreed coldly. "Though I wouldn't count on it." He continued backing away until they reached the edge of the clearing, then directed Emma to turn Rusty and proceed at a walk toward an alternate trail that branched westward. Noah maintained his position between Emma and the three men until they were well out of immediate danger, though he remained vigilant as they put distance between themselves and the clearing. Only when they had traveled a good half-mile did Noah allow himself to relax slightly, coming alongside Rusty to check on Emma and Sarah. "Are you both all right?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded, though her face remained pale. "Were they planning to rob us, or worse?" Noah confirmed grimly. "They were sizing us up, deciding if we were easy prey. When they realized I was armed and watchful, they reconsidered for now." "For now," Emma repeated, alarm sharpening her tone. "They won't give up that easily," Noah explained. "3 good Mustangs are worth a small fortune in the right market. Plus Rusty and our supplies." He didn't mention the other, more terrible value the men might have placed on Emma herself, though from her expression she understood the unspoken threat. "What do we do?" she asked, her arm tightening protectively around Sarah, who had remained unusually quiet during the encounter. "We keep moving, stay alert, and change our route," Noah decided. "This trail leads to the old trading post at Beaver Creek. It's abandoned now, but the buildings are sound. We can shelter there tonight instead of Black Pine Ridge. It's farther from the main trail to Fort Laramie, which means we're less likely to encounter those men again." Emma nodded, trusting his judgment. "Will it take us longer to reach the fort? A day, perhaps 2, Noah admitted. "But better safe than sorry. Besides," he added with a reassuring smile, "the extra time will allow your ankle more rest." As they continued along the western trail, the first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly intensifying into a steady downpour. Noah led them to a stand of pines that offered some shelter, where they paused long enough to don the oilskin ponchos he had packed for such weather. "Are those bad men going to follow us?" Sarah asked suddenly, as Noah helped adjust a poncho around her small frame. Noah glanced at Emma, then answered honestly but reassuringly. "They might try, but the rain will wash away our tracks, and I know this country better than they do. We'll be fine, Sarah." The child studied him with solemn eyes. "You won't let them take Storm, will you? Or hurt Mama?" "No," Noah promised, his voice firm with conviction. "I won't let anyone harm either of you or take Storm away. You have my word." Sarah nodded, apparently satisfied with this pledge. Good, because we need to get to Fort Laramie so you can visit us and Mama can make you pie. Despite the gravity of their situation, Noah couldn't help but smile at the child's straightforward priorities. That's right, and I'm looking forward to that pie too much to let anything interfere. Emma's eyes met his over Sarah's head, a wealth of emotion in their gray depths. As am I, she said softly. They continued through the rain, the weather providing both hardship and blessing discomfort for themselves, but concealment from potential pursuers. Noah set a careful pace, mindful of the increasingly slippery terrain and Emma's injured ankle. By late afternoon, the rain had eased to a drizzle, and the abandoned trading post came into view, a collection of weathered log buildings surrounding a central yard, nestled in a small valley beside Beaver Creek. It's not much to look at, Noah apologized as they approached, but the main building has a sound roof and a good fireplace. Trappers and traders used it until the railroad made this route less traveled. It looks perfect, Emma assured him, clearly relieved to have reached shelter after the tense journey. They rode into the yard, and Noah helped Emma and Sarah dismount before leading the horses to a lean-to stable attached to the main building. The structure still held remnants of hay from its active days, enough to supplement the grass the horses had grazed along the way. The main building's interior was dusty, but intact, a single large room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table, and benches built into the walls. Noah quickly set about starting a fire while Emma helped Sarah out of her wet clothes and into the dry garments they had managed to salvage from the flood. As warmth began to fill the space, Noah secured the door and shutters, more concerned about human threats than animal ones. When he returned to the fireside, he found Emma attempting to make a meal from their provisions, while Sarah had already fallen asleep on a bed of blankets near the hearth, exhausted by the day's events. She didn't even stay awake for supper, Emma said, her voice soft with maternal concern. The encounter with those men frightened her more than she let on. Noah nodded, accepting the cup of hot coffee Emma offered. She's brave, like her mother, but children sense danger even when they don't understand it. Emma sat beside him on the bench, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. You really believe those men will try to follow us? It's possible, Noah admitted, seeing no reason to shield her from the truth. Men like that, who prey on travelers in these parts, don't give up easily, but the rain and our change of route give us an advantage. Emma wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, seeking its warmth. I've never felt so vulnerable, she confessed. During the flood, there was no time for fear, only action. But today, seeing those men looking at us, at Sarah, she shuddered slightly. I felt utterly helpless. Without thinking, Noah placed his arm around her shoulders, offering comfort. To his surprise, Emma didn't pull away but leaned into his strength as if finding refuge there. You're not helpless, he said firmly, and you're not alone. I won't let anything happen to either of you. Emma looked up at him, her face close to his. I believe you, she whispered. That's what frightens me most, how quickly I've come to trust you, to depend on you. A week ago, you were a stranger. Now. She trailed off, but her eyes conveyed what words could not: the swift, unexpected connection that had formed between them, transcending the brevity of their acquaintance. Now, Noah prompted gently, his heart accelerating. Emma's gaze dropped to his lips, then back to his eyes. Now I find myself wondering what will happen when we reach Fort Laramie, when our journey together ends. It doesn't have to end, Noah said, the words emerging from some deep certainty within him. Emma, I know this is sudden, unexpected, but these days with you and Sarah have shown me what I've been missing in my solitary existence. He took a breath, gathering courage for words he'd never expected to speak. "I don't have much to offer, no fine house or stable income. Just myself, my skills, and a promise to protect and provide for you both as best I can." Emma's eyes widened with understanding. "Noah, are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that when we reach Fort Laramie, we consider a future together," he confirmed, his voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. "Not immediately. I understand you need time to establish yourselves, to be sure. But I want you to know that my intentions are honorable and my feelings genuine." A tear slipped down Emma's cheek, catching the firelight. "How can you be so certain? We've known each other less than a week." Noah wiped the tear away gently with his thumb. "Some things don't require years to recognize, Emma. Sometimes life shows you your path in an instant, like a flash flood changing the landscape overnight." A smile trembled on her lips at his analogy. "A flash flood brought us together, and nearly tore us apart before we'd even met," Noah added. "Perhaps that's why I'm certain. Having almost lost you before finding you, I understand exactly what would be lost if I let you go." Emma's hand came up to cover his where it rested against her cheek. "I feel the connection between us too," she admitted softly. "It defies reason, happening so quickly and under such circumstances, but it's real nonetheless." Noah's heart soared at her acknowledgement. "Then we'll take it one day at a time. When we reach Fort Laramie, I'll sell the Mustangs, deliver Storm to Sarah as promised, and call on you properly with your brother's approval, of course." Emma laughed quietly. "Ethan will be surprised to see his sister arrive with not only a child but a potential suitor as well. Will he object?" Noah asked, suddenly concerned about this brother he knew only through brief business interactions. "Ethan wants my happiness above all," Emma assured him. "He'll be cautious, protective, but ultimately, he respects my judgment." She paused, adding with a touch of mischief, "Besides, he already knows you by reputation. A man who deals fairly with horses is likely to deal fairly with women in Ethan's view." Noah smiled, relieved. "I'll do my best to prove him right." He hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered in his mind. "And Sarah, how would she feel about having me in her life?" Emma's expression softened. "Sarah adores you already. You found Molly, you're giving her Storm, and you promised to protect us from bad men. In her eyes, you're already a hero." "I'm no hero," Noah demurred. "Just a man who recognizes a treasure when he finds one." The tenderness in his voice brought fresh tears to Emma's eyes. Slowly, as if giving them both time to reconsider, Noah leaned forward until his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. For a moment, Emma remained still, and Noah feared he had presumed too much. Then her hand moved to the nape of his neck, drawing him closer as she returned the kiss with a sweetness that made his heart ache. When they parted, Emma's eyes remained closed for a heartbeat, her expression one of wonder and awakening. When she looked at him again, Noah saw in her gaze not just attraction but a deeper emotion, the beginning of love, tentative but real. "One day at a time," she whispered, echoing his earlier words. "But I believe our path is already clear." Noah nodded, too moved to speak. They sat together in the firelight, Emma's head eventually coming to rest against his shoulder as the rain continued its gentle percussion on the roof above. Across the room, Sarah slept peacefully, Molly clutched to her chest, unaware of the momentous shift that had occurred in her mother's heart. In that moment, in an abandoned trading post miles from anywhere, Noah Quinn found what he hadn't known. He was seeking not just a woman to love, but a family to cherish, a future to build, and a reason to stop wandering. The flash flood that had roared through Rattlesnake Canyon 4 nights ago had changed more than the physical landscape. It had altered the course of 3 lives, bringing them together in what Noah now recognized as nothing less than providence.